No matter which country you're from, the allegations the Canadian government has leveled against the Indian government are absolutely staggering.
I think it is obvious that the government of India made a fundamental error in thinking that they could engage in supporting criminal activity against Canadians here on Canadian soil. We will never tolerate the involvement of a foreign government threatening and killing Canadian citizens on Canadian soil.
Every part of that statement is a direct challenge, an accusation that India has not only violated international protocol, but has intentionally engaged in dangerous conduct that puts Canadians at risk.
The actions that are alleged to have taken place on Canadian soil are indeed a grave violation of our sovereignty and of Canada's rule of law.
Canada has expelled 6 Indian diplomats, including the High Commissioner to Canada. India has retaliated in kind, expelling 6 Canadian officials from Indian soil. And that has left 2 glaring questions with somewhat unsatisfying answers. What does Canada believe India did exactly? And what happens next? The most recent accusations came in a very unusual way, directly from the commissioner of the RCMP to an audience of journalists.
It's not our normal process to publicly disclose information about ongoing investigation in an effort to preserve their integrity.
But, he continued to say, the threat to public safety and their own effort to work with Indian authorities to resolve the problem had both become so untenable that they had no other option but to go public.
Investigations have revealed that Indian diplomats and consular officials based in Canada leveraged their official position to engage in clandestine activities, such as collecting information for the government of India, either directly or through their agents, and other individuals who acted voluntarily or through coercion.
So let's break this down in plain language, because reporters in the room had all kinds of questions for the commissioner, along the lines of, what are you actually alleging? And he did provide some answers. So the RCMP accuses Indian officials in Canada of gathering intelligence, using their positions and their contacts, sometimes through coercion.
Some of these individuals and businesses were coerced and threatened into working with the government of India.
And then, police say, Indian officials used that gathered intelligence to harass, intimidate, extort, and sometimes kill South Asians in Canada, specifically those who support the creation of an independent Sikh state carved out of India's territory. India's government sees this movement as expressly threatening its sovereignty and has often branded elements of it as terrorist activity.
The RCMP chose to come out today and disrupt the pattern of Indian diplomats collecting through questionable and illegal means information on Canadian citizens that were then fed to criminal organizations that would then take violent actions from extortion to murder against Canadians.
CBC has reported extensively on the claim by both Canadian and US law enforcement that the Indian government has made use of criminal gangs to attack its enemies abroad. An unsealed US indictment late last year went into extensive detail of a failed plot to assassinate a Sikh political activist on American soil. That indictment accuses an identified Indian government employee working together with others in India and elsewhere to kill someone whose separatist organization the Indian government has banned, and the man hired to orchestrate the killing involved in international narcotics and weapons trafficking. In May of this year, the RCMP announced 3 arrests in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Sikh activist who was gunned down last year in a parking lot outside a place of worship.
Police say the killing of a man outside a Sikh temple Sunday night appears to have been targeted.
The brazen act of violence has shocked Surrey's Sikh community.
The 3 men arrested, all alleged associates of a criminal gang with links to a notorious Punjabi gangster, Lawrence Bishnoi.
But what we've seen is from an RCMP perspective, is the use of organized crime elements And I will say and it's been publicly attributed and claimed by one organized crime group in particular, which is the Bishnoi Group. So that's what we're seeing here in Canada. And we believe that that group is connected to agents of the government of India.
The RCMP claims Indian diplomats have been working with criminal gangs to effectively do their dirty work.
They are saying that this isn't just government of India officials. These are individuals who are networked within the community, that there could be organized gangs that are involved in perhaps extortion or harassment and intimidation.
They've had to explicitly warn specific members of the Sikh community in Canada of specific threats.
Since September 2023, 12, 13?
At least a dozen.
At least a dozen.
And the scale of this alleged operation?
In regards to homicide, there's approximately 8 individuals that have been arrested and charged in relation to homicides. In relation to extortions, there's at least 22 individuals that have been arrested and charged. Some of these have connections to the government of India.
To be clear, we're not seeking diplomatic confrontation with India, but we will not sit quietly as agents of any country are linked to efforts to threaten, harass, or even kill Canadians, period.
Although the angry tone has been really quite consistent, it has also escalated this last time around with these latest allegations.
Now, it's hard to overstate just how this all represents a fundamental breakdown of trust between Canada and India.
This is not good, and the trend lines are going in the exact wrong direction. Number one, assume that diplomatic relations are going to get worse, and assume trust in that bilateral relationship is going to get worse. Like, that much I think you can probably take to the bank.
And not just because Canada has accused India of wrongdoing, but because India has rejected outright even the suggestion that its diplomats have done anything wrong.
Canada's Justin Trudeau shamelessly lied about India, this anchor says, but India stayed strong.
And all earlier attempts to find a resolution privately fell apart.
When I spoke with Prime Minister Modi at the end of last week, I highlighted how incredibly important the meeting between our national security advisors in Singapore this weekend was going to be. He told me that he was aware of that meeting. I impressed upon him that it needed to be taken very, very seriously.
But here's India's official statement, calling Canada's accusations preposterous imputations, adding this is all just part of Justin Trudeau's political agenda.
There was a lot of fury in the statements from India's Foreign Affairs Ministry. They say that he is using this for the election coming up next year in Canada.
Whatever happened at that meeting, I can guarantee you that it did not go well. I mean, they talked about it not meeting expectations. I think that's probably the understatement of this conversation.
India's government has underscored the high standing of their High Commissioner, 36 years of service, but among the 6 diplomats Canada has just expelled. And they've said quite plainly, as they did with the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil, that any assertion the government of India was involved is simply untrue. Canada rejects that.
Canada has provided credible, irrefutable evidence of ties between agents of the government of India and a murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil.
That man, by the way, the Canadian Embassy's second highest ranking diplomat in India, is among the 6 diplomats India has just expelled.
The top 6 high-level diplomats given until Saturday to get out of the country.
Which brings us to today, the 2 countries at a stark impasse. The 6 diplomats Canada just expelled, the RCMP considered persons of interest. Now, that doesn't mean that they're suspects, or even that they necessarily did anything wrong. But it does strongly suggest that police believe these individuals know something about threats against Canadians. Intimidation, coercion, extortion, or worse.
There has been some conversations in the past about lifting the immunity for these individuals so that we can interview them, and we were not successful in doing so.
India appears unwilling to give Canada the kind of cooperation it demands. in the past, it has instead demanded to see evidence as a precondition for cooperation, which Canada now says it has shown, but which India says it has not. All we can be sure about right now, that the relationship between Canada and India is substantially worse off today than it had been.